Huagu. The story goes that there was a scholar from Shaanxi named An Youyu, a man of generosity and righteousness, and he was also fond of releasing animals. Whenever he saw hunters capturing birds and animals, he would often buy them at high prices to set them free. One time, when he was helping with his uncle's funeral, he returned home late, and while passing through Huashan, he got lost in a chaotic valley. He couldn't find his way out and felt very frightened. Suddenly, he spotted flickering lights outside a rock crevice, and he hurriedly headed towards it. As he approached, he saw an old man with a hunched back walking towards him from a few steps away, leaning on a crutch. An Youyu stopped and was about to ask for directions when the old man spoke first, asking who he was. An Youyu explained his situation of being lost, mentioning that he had seen lights ahead and believed it to be a village where he could stay for the night. The old man said, "That's not a peaceful place. It's fortunate that I arrived. Come with me quickly. My thatched cottage can accommodate you." An Youyu was delighted and followed the old man for about a mile, reaching a small village. The old man knocked on a firewood door, and an old woman came out, asking, "Has my husband returned?" The old man replied in affirmation. An Youyu entered the house and found it to be just as low and damp as before. The old man brightened an oil lamp, asked him to sit down, and then began to prepare food. The old woman said, "This gentleman is our benefactor, not a stranger. Since I'm not very agile, let Huagu come out and serve wine." After a while, a young woman came out with food and wine. She arranged everything and stood by the old man, her autumn-like eyes filled with concern for An Youyu. An Youyu noticed that the young woman was charming and beautiful, resembling a celestial being that had descended to earth. The old man asked her to serve the wine. Inside the western room, there was a coal-fired stove. The young woman went in, stirred the embers, and started to warm the wine. An Youyu asked, "Who is she to you?" The old man replied, "I'm surnamed Zhang, over 70 years old, and she's my only daughter. We don't have servants in our modest household, so I dared to have my wife and daughter come out for you. Please don't laugh at us." An Youyu then asked, "Has she been promised to someone?" The old man answered, "She's not betrothed yet." An Youyu couldn't help but praise her beauty and intelligence repeatedly. The old man was modest, but suddenly, Huagu exclaimed. Hurrying over, An Youyu saw that flames were rising from the boiling wine. The old man extinguished the flames while scolding, "Such a big girl, and she doesn't even know when the wine is boiling." Then he noticed an unfinished grass figure of the purple maiden god by the stove, and scolded again, "Your hair is so long, yet you act like a child." He picked it up and showed it to An Youyu, saying, "She was so engrossed in making this that she let the wine boil over. You even praised her, aren't you embarrassed?" An Youyu took a look and saw that the purple maiden god was meticulously crafted with eyebrows, robes, and skirts. Despite being a mere ornament, its craftsmanship was exquisite. He couldn't help but marvel. Though it's a plaything, one can still perceive the wisdom within. He examined it closely, enjoying it. Huagu kept pouring wine for him with a charming smile, not showing any shyness. An Youyu gazed at her, deeply moved. Coincidentally, the old woman was busy in the kitchen, and the old man followed her. An Youyu took this opportunity to tell Huagu, "Seeing your ethereal beauty, my soul has been captivated. I was thinking of arranging a marriage proposal through a matchmaker to your family. However, I'm afraid it might not work out. What should I do?" Huagu silently warmed the wine on the stove, seemingly not hearing. An Youyu asked a few more times, but still received no response. He then approached the western room, and Huagu quickly stood up and said sternly, "What is this audacious person doing here?" An Youyu pleaded while kneeling on the ground, and Huagu attempted to leave. An Youyu suddenly stood up and tightly embraced her. Huagu let out a scream, her voice trembling. The old man hurried over upon hearing the noise, and An Youyu quickly released her, feeling ashamed and afraid. However, Huagu calmly explained to her father, the wine was about to boil over, and if it weren't for Mr. and the wine pot would have melted. Upon hearing this, An Youyu's worries eased. and he thanked her. His infatuation with her grew stronger, and he forgot how he had come to be in this situation. He pretended to be drunk and left the wine table, and Huagu also departed. The old man prepared his bedding and left the room. An Youyu couldn't sleep and got up at dawn to bid farewell and immediately asked a good friend to come and arrange a marriage proposal. By dusk, the friend returned, but to everyone's surprise, he couldn't find the village. An Youyu didn't believe it and had his servant prepare a horse. He set out himself to find the way. Upon reaching Huashan, he found nothing but tall mountains and cliffs, and the village was nowhere to be found. He inquired with the locals, and they said they had rarely heard of a family named Zhang. He returned home disheartened. An Youyu's days were filled with longing and restlessness. He couldn't eat or sleep well, and soon fell ill with a coma, confined to his bed. Despite his family's efforts to nurse him with porridge, he couldn't keep it down. While in a semi-conscious state, he kept calling out for Huagu, which puzzled his family. They didn't understand what he meant and could only keep vigil over him, watching as his condition worsened. One night, the caretakers grew weary and fell asleep. In his dim consciousness, An Youyu felt a gentle push, and when he slightly opened his eyes, he saw that it was Huagu standing by his bedside. His mind became clear, and he looked at her as tears flowed from her eyes. Huagu lowered her head and approached him, smiling. "To what extent has your infatuation driven you, my dear?" Saying this, she sat on the bed, her arms round An Youyu's neck, using her hands to massage his temples. An Youyu felt as though a musk-like scent had entered his head through his nose, permeating his entire body. After massaging for a while, he began to sweat profusely, and gradually, his limbs were also covered in sweat. Huagu held a water basin with both hands, moistened a handkerchief, and wiped his body for him. After wiping, she let him lean against her chest. An Youyu felt that his body was light and relaxed, and he gradually regained his strength. He was overjoyed and tried to speak, but Huagu placed her fingers on his lips and said, "Don't speak, otherwise, you'll end up in the same state again." An Youyu nodded and remained silent. Huagu helped him change his clothes and tidy up the bed. She then went to the kitchen and cooked a pot of soup. She brought it to An Youyu's bedside and helped him eat spoon by spoon. An Youyu didn't dare to act rashly and could only let Huagu take care of him. After finishing the soup, Huagu helped him lie down, massaging his temples again. After a while, An Youyu began to feel dizzy and fell asleep, and he slept soundly throughout the night. When he woke up the next day, An Youyu's mind was clear, his body was light, and his strength had returned. He couldn't help but feel grateful to Huagu. He wanted to express his gratitude, but Huagu was nowhere to be found. He thought that Huagu might be shy and went to the kitchen to look for her, but she wasn't there either. The only person there was an old woman making porridge. Seeing An Youyu, the old woman smiled and said, "Young man, you've finally recovered. Thanks to Miss Zhang's care, you're now energetic." An Youyu asked, "Where is Miss Zhang?" The old woman replied, "Miss Zhang? There's no one with that name here. You must be mistaken." An Youyu was puzzled and asked, "Wasn't it Miss Zhang who took care of me last night?" The old woman laughed and said, "Young man, you must have had a vivid dream. There's no Miss Zhang here." An Youyu was stunned. He thought about the events of the past few days, and everything seemed like a dream. He couldn't find any traces of the village, the old man, the old woman, or Huagu. It was as if they had never existed. An Youyu returned home, bewildered and lost. His family was overjoyed to see him recovered and asked about his experience. An Youyu could only shake his head and say that it was all a dream. Despite his recovery, he was haunted by the memory of Huagu and the village. He couldn't forget her ethereal beauty and her care for him. He became melancholic and often sighed, longing for something that he could never have again. He withdrew from the world, spending his days in quiet contemplation. And so, the story of An Youyu and Huagu ends with a sense of mystery and longing. Whether Huagu was a celestial being, a spirit, or a product of An Youyu's imagination remains unknown. The tale highlights the ephemeral and elusive nature of certain experiences and emotions, leaving readers to ponder the boundaries between reality and the intangible. Yi Shishi said, "The distinction between humans and animals is minimal, not a definitive conclusion. When it comes to receiving kindness and doing everything in one's power to repay it until old age, there are times when, compared to animals, humans should feel ashamed." As for Huagu, initially, her simplicity contained wisdom. In the end, her indifference held profound affection. Through her, we come to understand that simplicity is the highest realm of wisdom, and indifference is the deepest form of emotion. She is a celestial being. She is a celestial being.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.